Good day, everyone. How are you? I hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. Just waiting on Bob to join us. Today, we're going to be talking about financing and budgeting with Bob's assistance as it relates to the article that we've been covering for the last few weeks. I did have some technical difficulties this morning trying to get this to stream from one of my pages, but it didn't work out. Here he is.
Morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. And you?
Good. We are live.
I see that.
Yes. Apologies
And
for the technical difficulties this morning. I was trying to get us to stream through the logistics lens page, but I actually don't meet the requirements for that yet. So I was like, so now we're
oh
just
yeah,
streaming a
I
profile.
didn't know there were requirements on LinkedIn for live streaming, but
You
uh,
know, because I have it, I didn't it's been so long since I thought about it. And I thought that it would roll over. I just assumed that I could use it on my other pages, but this life we live, we learn, and we work work towards the next milestone. That's it.
okay. Oh, you mean logistics lens itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't meet it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Did you get a haircut?
that I did. Yes. No. Well, I don't get haircuts. I give them to
Okay.
myself, and when I make
Mhm.
mistakes, I got to take it all off. So
Oh. Oh, well, it looks like you didn't make a mistake. You still got some hair up top.
yeah. It's pretty short right now. When I was fading the back up here, I made a big mistake with the shorter thing, and so I had to take it
Mhm.
all to that length.
Yeah, it
That's it. The way I figure it is, you know, if a mistake is made, it can always grow back. But if I'm going to pay somebody to make mistakes in my hair, well, I don't want to. So I just rather do it myself. And I know that I have had at different times let other people do it, but for the most part, it's just me. So,
admittedly, that's how we ended up here
oh,
because I am a licensed cosmetologist, but I decided that I was going to do a pixie cut. I just wanted to trim an inch, but then the lines didn't add up, and before I knew it, here we are. And I'm like, you know what? This is where I want it to be anyway. It's gonna grow back. We're fine. It is
so
what
well,
it is.
I've been doing it on and off for ever since I was in the army. I used to do my own hair in the army because when I first went in the army in the '80s, getting a haircut was like $5, right? But
Wow.
when you're not making much money, when you're making that entry level stuff back in the '80s, it wasn't very much money. So it's laughable as compared to today. But
Wow.
$5 meant a lot, so
Yeah.
I saved it. Done it
Wow.
myself. I could easily just do that, take a set of clippers and cut my hair off. I didn't need
Yeah.
to pay somebody $5 to do that. So,
Yeah.
and it just stuck with me throughout, you know, I guess the last 30, 40 years. So something
Wow.
like that.
I don't blame you. And that's a lot of practice. And you know what? Mistakes happen even for professionals. So
Yes. Yeah. Particularly in the back where it's all done by feel when so I suppose they
you got
have
to get
mirrors
a back
for that.
mirror. Yeah, you have to get one of those mirrors that you could like install into the bathroom wall that just, or even like a handheld.
Yeah, the ones that fold around so you can see from this window to
Yeah,
that. Yeah, so that
it
just
helps.
messes me up because I can't figure out what ways my hand is supposed to move. So when I
That's
see
how
my
I made the mistake. That is how I did it. And I cut opposite and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? As soon as I made the mistake, I knew I was like, 3 more inches have to come off. I was like, this is ridiculous. But I can relate. I know what you mean because I have one of the mirrors too. So it doesn't make it much easier, but it does help a little bit.
yeah, I
Um,
just don't use it. So I just do all of it by feel. So it just makes it easier. So, but then sometimes I do make mistakes. So, yeah, it's more difficult to do. I mean, this is easy. this takes a few minutes this way, but to keep it long and to get the fade and the taper correct, with using a pair of clippers rather than a pair of scissors, because it's difficult. You can't do scissors. So just getting that fade correct is the most difficult part. So it just takes a lot of play. And I don't know how many times I've moved that line because I just couldn't get the line straight. Next thing you know, I took it all off. So,
well, I'm glad this haircut seemed to have worked out for you. But so today I was telling everybody that we're going to continue the conversation talking about financing and budgeting for starting a truck company. So far, we've had several sessions and we'll continue to have more throughout the month of October. And so far, the feedback has been that the people enjoying this are learning. So I think that it's really great that that I'm able to pick your brain on these things, especially as, we're facing the current situation in the industry. With the strike and everything that's happening, I feel like there could be some people who might have been on the fence trying to jump in, but that's for another conversation.
That is another conversation. And we don't, you and I, we've been doing this the last couple of months, and we haven't actually spoken outside of doing these the podcast every Wednesday morning. And since we've been sticking to this series that is ultimately, I guess, a book that I've been writing, we haven't spoken about some of the topics that some of the things that happened, like the strike. And I think it's going to be damaging to all of us that work in this market right now. And so it's important to note that what they're doing is they're fighting to keep automation out. Essentially, it's not so much about the money as it is about getting them to commit to no automation. Because if you take a look at Long Beach, for instance, which has a lot of automation, that there's very few people, if any, that ever go down onto the floor of where the containers sit and work with the straddles, other than the truck drivers themselves who pull the truck into there. Those straddles are all automated over there. And so it does take away jobs by going to that automation. But if we, the unions, they have good points, but at the same time, it's like the last part of a bygone era that's just hanging on for dear life in these ports. And, are we going to see the automation? Are we going to see them give a little bit in order to save some? Are we going to find some balance in there? Well, that's a question that we come down to. And I think it's appropriate at this time, because one of the things they're talking about is the money that the ship lines have been making. And some of the ship lines, as we know, have been raking it in, but others have been struggling. So, it comes back to the financing and budgeting of starting a trucking company and how that works throughout, whether it's a trucking company, no matter what kind of company it is about the finance and budgeting is extremely important to manage and have an understanding of, So as we look at that side and about the amount of money that they're talking about, and these employees of the port system itself fighting for something better, even to just keep their jobs, that's something we can all understand and identify with. So if we're out here starting a company right now in one of the toughest times we've seen since, I would say like the 80s when deregulation happened, financing and budget is extremely important to understand in order to be able to just get that start, having the right amount of money in the bank, and how we're going to use that, how it's going to be maintained throughout the cycle of startup. So
absolutely. And money, when you're first getting started, admittedly, that's not my area expertise. I've always struggled with budgeting and financing, but that's why we have you.
I do too. I mean, there's There's times when no matter how much you prepare for the worst, and no matter how much you have, sometimes you're just waiting for that right time to jump. And I waited far too long to jump, and not, having confidence in my own skill set. Although, on one hand, I was independent. On another hand, by the time the term of my other company, my consulting company, RL Jarrett, was coming into where it's at today, the last few years, I was kind of captive to one company, and with thinking that we were going to build something bigger and that we were all on the same page. Well, you know that because you were part of that whole fiasco there, as it was, the ship was sinking. So,
Right.
as one thing was going down, another door opened, and got me out here into another startup that, um, you, you know, I'm relying on clients, but at the same time, I jumped in with both feet, and because there's no time like the present. I was thinking, and I said at the beginning, it's like an all or nothing thing, and I think that's the way we have to go at it when we jump into one of these things. If you can swing the startup cost, and during that startup time, that first few months before the revenue really, or the first 30 days in a trucking company before the revenue really starts flowing from the work that you've done, depending on how you're doing the billing, whether you're taking some kind of quick pay or whether you're taking some kind of reduction to be paid in 7 days, 14 days, or 30 days. As a
Yep.
trucking company, those things are important, and that's where that budget comes in. So when we talk about the budget, the things in order to start a company, as we get into that, uh, those things are the most important things to look for, is right at the beginning, how much money you have, and the budget, and how you plan to use it, and where that money, well, how you plan to use it. And so I think that's a good place to start.
All
So
right.
uh,
You mentioned before how you jumped in with 2 feet and how it was different compared to other initiatives that you had. And I will say that on my journey in personal development, the fear motivation that comes along with doing something like that and knowing that it's literally all or nothing is it hits differently than knowing you're starting something new and you want to be successful because it ignites, I want to say, even fight or flight in our brain where it's like, this has to work. And everything that I do from here on out has to work. Um, because the alternative, if it doesn't, it's just not a reality that we can, step into. So I
well,
will say,
that's a go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say that, that fight or flight response, that you mentioned, is absolutely true, and one of the most difficult things in all my experience of startups and failures, to do, is to kind of hold back in order to build a good foundation. So just when we say that, when we talk about a foundation, most of us think about the foundation of buildings built on. So,
Yep.
and if we don't have a strong structure down there, we can't go, to 150 floors. So, or 200, or whatever they are nowadays, some of these high things. So, and for me, wanting to jump in too fast and go after, so one of the things you want to do is you want to try to grab as many customers as you can, right, the clients, and get that money going, and go full speed in that sales thing. But if you don't have a good foundation of, the financial structure, the tech structure, or the today's tech is part of the foundation of all that we do. No, even though we can change it and we can alter it as we move along, we can with our financials as well. Those things need to be flexible, but the foundation, that the way we act, the way we perceive our business, the way we want to build it, has to be strong. So, even though it can be somewhat fluid in those things, we still have to make certain that we cross the T's and dot the I's. Those small things are extremely important when we're going into the budget. Okay.
Yes.
So the budget is okay. how much money do we have? And then how are we going to allocate those things? So when we start and we think about a startup of a trucking company, first you got to decide what niche you're going to be in. Are you buying a courier vehicle, a smaller commercial vehicle that's under 10,000 pounds? Are we buying one that falls between 10,000 and 33,000 pounds? Are we looking at a dump truck? Are we looking at tractor trailer? Are we looking at, drayage work so that you have tractor in multiple chassis because of being able to go get containers? Are you doing it on your own completely with your own motor carrier authority? So all these different things that we've talked about up to this point have an effect on that budget and how much cash you have. So I think once you choose that niche, what's your strong point within the industry, or what do you dream of being, right? Then at that point, that's when you decide your customer base. Once you have that dream in place and your knowledge, you have your customer base. Now we're planning the budget. So now, how much money of our budget are we going to use? How strong is our credit? How much truck can we buy? Do we want to spend $50,000 on a tractor so we can pull containers with port chassis type things? So that way you don't have the investment in the other equipment. So, but you got to have credit to be able to do that. So, or do we buy a straight truck and start in some kind of expedite where we're expediting, smaller shipments that need to get someplace fast, like in the automotive parts industry, and keeping, a factory fed with the proper parts so that the line doesn't have to stop. These kind of things are all things that determine where we're at. So when we get that truck, we get that financing from our credit in place. Now we have to have money for the other things. So just putting the down payment on the truck, getting the financing in place is the start. Now we have to have money to be able to get the type of plates, the commercial plates that we need to have. We need to have money to get the insurances in place for the company. We need to be doing the legal ends of getting our motor carrier authority in place and being able to pay that, even though it's a small piece. All these things have to be put in place and they have to be part of the budget. And we have to be ready to prepare if we finance our insurance package to put that 25% down and then make those monthly payments over the next 10 months just to make through the year. Do you have enough to be able to do that? Do you have enough money in the budget to earmark a portion for the fuel? So do you know what kind of fuel economy you're going to get? What's the best place to buy the fuel? Where are you going to be? All these kind of things. So when we talk about budget, we want to talk about all those things. Everything that costs money, we want to put them in a category. And when we put them in categories, we may as well be doing the accounting and doing it for a tax category. So now there's all kinds of ways of being able to do these budgets. For me, a long time ago, I developed a spreadsheet for an owner operator with their own authority or an owner operator working for a trucking company. I have a couple of different ones where what we do is we plug in certain beginning costs. And by my experience, I've went through and I put into a budget into those spreadsheets where I put it in. You plug in the amount of money you have, you plug in the certain big picture items like the trucks, and then your fuel mileage, those kind of things. And the next thing you know, it's going to break down all the other expenses as a percentage of revenue that you're going to have, or that money you put in there. So that way, and get an idea of how much you're going to spend. Now that becomes a benchmark. So those
Can I ask you a
benchmarks.
question before we get into the
Sure.
benchmarks?
Right.
You mentioned reserves. At one point, I was looking at the Amazon DSP program. They recommend a certain amount of reserves in order to cover yourself while you're transitioning through that program.
Absolutely.
And I know that every business model is different depending on what you try to go on. Do you have like a, I guess like a benchmark that you like to tell people to have in reserves, or like do you say try to keep 3 to 6 months, or what is your recommendation on reserves in a perfect world? Obviously it's not always perfect, but
I would say, well, now what we're talking about is here in the trucking environment. I am going to say you want to have 90 days, and
Okay.
and not just 90 days to operate the company, but 90 days to also think about personal expenses. So okay. So if you've calculated your monthly personal expenses that you need 5,000 a month,
Yeah.
for all your personal things, then what we can do is say that now we're going to do, so we need 15,000 to be able to live for 3 months
Yeah.
without any kind of, and that's kind of a rainy day fund. And I recommend that for everywhere, minimum, of 3 months. If you can do more, by all means do more. So now then, let's take that. So now if you need 5,000 for personal, now you need also then for 3 months, now that's 15,000. So now if you need down payment on a truck and you're going to keep your truck in the range of a tractor, for instance, a used tractor, in the range of 4 to 6 years old, that's got about 500,000 miles on it, that's going to cost somewhere, depending on the brand, between $50,000 and $75,000 right now, and you're going to need some money down on that. So in order to, because unless you're going to do a lease, but you're still going to need some money down. So depending on how you do that, depending on what your credit is, you're going to need another $5,000 to $15,000 on that truck to put down, depending on the variables of the truck quality, all that kind of stuff, and then interest rates and those things. So that, depending on how that's going and what you need to add that in there. So now you're looking at if you're looking at a minimum of 5,000 down, you're looking at, you need 20,000 in cash. But now you need to have some operating capital. So beside your other startup expenses, being the $1,000 is going to take to get your company in place and get your authority in place. If we're talking about a trucker package costing $20,000 a year on average here in the East Coast market, you're going to need to have about 25% of that down. That's another 5,000 that you're going to put on there. So now we're at $25,000 in cash in order to get there before you start making revenue. So now once you have all that legal stuff in place and you've got your truck registered, you're going to need fuel. You're going to need some other things, even for some minor repairs as you go along. Used equipment, no matter how good it looks, no matter how much it's been tested, no matter how much history you have, things are going to go wrong. And when you're talking about a truck of that size, you don't get much work done on a truck for less than $500. Matter of fact, the average expense on a truck of that age going into it's going to cost you around $2,000. And in your first 90 to 180 days, your first 3 to 6 months, you're probably going to have to do at least 2 times of things that's going to happen, that you're going to need to do major repairs, whether it be a clutch, which is going to cost you $2,000. Hopefully you made certain that there's good tires on it and whatnot, but then a turbo is going to cost you $2,000. These are all peripherals that can on the motor that can pretty much go at any time. So now if you're going to have at least 2 in that 180 days, I would say that you need to be having another 5,000 in cash or 5,000 on a credit card somewhere to be able to get into that mode and be able to get into those maintenance things as you're learning how to do the maintenance program on the particular truck, learning the ins and outs, the feel of that truck and whatnot. So, as we look through all these little things, now we'll see we're pushing the tune of having startup. When I said, another $5,000 in there. So now we're at $30,000 in money to get there. So, and that includes the personal side. And to me, somewhere between that, I would just tag on another, 50% or so thereabouts and onto that, just for other incidentals that you didn't see, in order to be able to have that in that first 3 to 6 months, right? So then we're talking about in a tractor trailer thing. To me, having that $50,000 out there. Can we get started for cheaper? Yes, but not if we're going to start from not having a truck, jump in with both feet, buying a truck, and have your own motor carrier authority. So if I have some experience in trucking at all, then I'm going to know where I need to go, and I'm going to be able to adjust that a little bit. So if I've been a fleet manager, if I've been working as a company driver, trying to figure out all those things. If you've been working as a company driver because you have the license and now you're planning on buying your own truck and doing your own thing, then through that time, you should plan on your work and put so much back until you have that money and ready to jump in. There's other programs out there. Go ahead.
No, I was saying absolutely. And I think also too, what could be of helpful resource is maybe for you to create like a PDF document that you can share on LinkedIn of like different startup costs as we've outlined it, and then have people download it. That could really help, and is a good marketing tool for you.
It could be. So, and the article is up that talks about the trucking, and it's a synopsis of the chapter of the book. I don't want to give too much away. I want to.
Just enough
The
to
book
wet
is
the
going to go into a
palate.
lot more detail than what we're talking. Go ahead.
Oh, just said just enough to wet the palate.
Yeah. So and that's kind of like where it's at. But you know what? Ultimately, I'd like to take the articles and the and the videos and put them in my blog that's hopefully going to be being built by the end of the year. And I want to be able to have all that together so people can come in and look at the videos and hear the type, but also, so obviously as we talk, I have my contact information on the screen. Anybody can scan it and get right in touch with me.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I want to have that at the HTG website so that one of the things, you know, I want to make certain that we're doing with HTG is that any way we can, we want to be able to give back, and you know, having the book available for download, a guide for people will be important,
Absolutely.
so that they can do that. And so I want to be able to have the graphs. I want to have the work pages within the book, so people can see and so they can get an understanding of ideas of how it might work if we were doing a startup. And as we go through, so as we go through each chapter, which is essentially what we're doing here, each week is a different chapter. So there's going to be a total of 10 chapters. Even though we're 6 of 11 articles, the first one was a summary, kind of like what would be the index of the book, and what page is where, you know, and then we're going to go a lot more in depth in each one of the chapters as we go through. So now I pretty much have, I guess, everything that I want written, but what I'm doing is putting it back together so I can make certain I have the detail of understanding, so that each chapter will have the questions. So I will be going through and having those type questions, particularly a few what if questions, even though I'm not fond of what if questions. Uh, you know, so just so people can get an idea or an interpretation for regular work. You know, I mean, if people want to understand the financing a little bit more, we can talk about
Why are
my
you not a fan of what if questions?
well, because I think when people spend too much time saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? They're not focused on what is happening right in front of them. And so, for me, when we have a dream, uh, and we're going to, that dream, we're going to break down into multiple goals, right? Okay, so we have a dream of one day having a $10 million trucking company that's, you know, got 50 trucks or whatever it happens to be, and you want to, and that's the legacy you want to leave to your family, or something like that. Then that dream you have to break down in steps in order to get there. If you want to build it from scratch because you don't have the money to just go buy one, uh, you know, you have to break that down into those steps. So now, if we start what ifing, if this happens, if that happens, and all these things that can happen along the way, then we're going to talk ourselves out of doing what we need to do. So we need to stay focused in our dream, in our goals, and how we attain those things. So,
Absolutely.
so therefore, when people start doing all these what if questions, I come back and say, well, let's not think about that now. Let's remain fluid so that when those questions do arise, we have answers and we can pivot according to our answers that we have at the time. So,
Absolutely.
you know, because we can't forecast what's going to happen. So we can only go with the flow as it happens and hopefully make good decisions at the time. So,
And this is all part of setting that foundation. When you're solid in your foundation and you prepare and you have access to resources, you can spend less time on the what if. And the what if can definitely generate some anxiety because you're looking to the future. And that's where that frozen feeling, and I forget what um there's a there's a phrase for, and it just completely slipped my mind, but
that
when
I
analysis
understand. It happens all the
paralysis,
time.
Analysis paralysis. So you just get
Ah,
stuck in thinking about what happens and what could happen, and you
and
keep
what
yourself
that
on
leads
the
to,
hamster wheel.
that that leads to negativity or pessimism.
Yes.
And those things I don't like to have in my life. So
We
I
don't have
don't like to
space for
think about
that.
those things. I
We
don't
don't
have
have
space for that.
I don't
Life is too short for us to have that. So, and that's something that we don't need to have. All we have to do is watch those movies, Inside Out 2. That's my brain. That's the best explanation of how my mind works and emotions. Are you familiar with the two movies?
I am not, but I'm gonna add them to my list.
So, well, okay, they're children's movies.
Oh,
Starts
cool.
with the baby, and they're talking about and basically it's how we grow emotionally, and you, and those emotions and how we identify them, and why it's important that we do that. So and why anxiety and negative emotions even come into our lives, and I understand why they're there, but they're things that we should not be able to focus on. So,
Yes.
it's like having somebody important in your life pass away, and they were important in your life. You loved them, so I understand the grief. But at the same time, we have to focus on all those positive things that they left, the legend that was there, and so the positive side of things is where we need to maintain our focus, so that anxiety, that grief, or that anger, that hurt doesn't control our lives. And so it takes a bit of an emotional understanding of our emotions and how they work in order to be able to do that, to realize that you can feel good at the same time as feeling bad, and not let the bad override the good. So
Absolutely.
that's where we do the same thing in how we plan our businesses, or how we plan to attain our goals, whether it's a business or it's just some other type of goal. We have to break it down into smaller pieces, focus on the positive, and always keep working towards those positives, and not let the negatives come in, whether we're talking about some kind of health that we're doing, health system that we're doing in order to improve our own health, whether we're talking about taking the time for our emotional health. So we got emotional, physical health, we got our financial health, and we have however we attain those goals. Whether our goal is to, be a president or CEO of some multinational corporation and working your way from the bottom to the top, or whether we're talking about starting a business. And no matter where it's at, those goals and how we plan there, and that pathway that is kind of flexible and or fluid to get there, it's going to change, because our life changes as we change. And so what ifing is a negative thing that none of us needs. It just causes anxiety and anger and loss of control of our emotions, and
Let
that's
me ask you a
important that
question.
sure.
How do you think, because I'm thinking about your history as a veteran. I'm thinking like how how do you think that experience is helping you today?
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's a part of you know I mean, I could get into some really deeply personal stuff that I feel was more important, but I think that my time as a veteran, I was in high school when I joined the National Guard. uh, it was kind of a way out, and the only vision that I could see of getting away from the the atmosphere that I grew up in. And not that that was all bad, that shaped me as well.
Yeah.
So I believe the discipline is important. Having that, preparing for the worst. One of the things that I remember is that going into the army when I went active, first basic training, and then after that, there's an idea that we had to shake off, from growing up, and some people and their weaknesses. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a farm environment where I worked from the time I can remember all the way through, in whether it was the family farm or a neighbor's farm or whatever. I was always working. I don't have a time when I don't remember it. All the way back to, when I was a little tyke running around in big boots, waterproof boots, and pulling weeds in the garden with my mom as a little tyke, and then growing up from there and all the different type works and understanding that, there's so many different aspects of life. So what the Army brought to me was discipline. The idea that no matter what we're trying to do, is we have to see the vision of what it is. We prepare for the worst. So when you're going into the Army infantry, you prepare to go to war. You don't want to go to war. Nobody wants to go to war, but you have to prepare yourself physically and mentally to get there. So the things that we had to do took discipline in order to be able to become that expert infantryman, right? And so that's that discipline and that mindset of reaching our goals piece by piece, I guess, is what it taught me. So
That's essentially what I was looking for. And that's what I was thinking, because as we're talking and as you're laying out the foundation for starting this business, for starting a trucking business, it's evident that your experience in the Army transfers over in the attention to detail, setting goals that are attainable, but also staying focused on the tasks at hand, because it's always going to be a challenge in life where because 80% of our thoughts as a human, no matter who you are, 80% of them are negative, science based. Okay, is what we choose to listen to that gets the amplifier. So we can choose to be on the we can choose to listen to our 80% negative, or we can put a little bit more energy and focus on that 20% positive. And discipline,
where'd you
certainly.
grab those numbers from?
So many different books. I can
80% negative. I can't say,
Mhm.
I don't have nowhere near that kind of negativity in my life.
Well,
So
that's because you've chosen to listen to the positive thoughts. And that's why I find people who are positive so fascinating, because it's not that you don't have them. It's not that you are supernatural, that you don't have negative thoughts. It's that you choose to give them less space. You choose to pay attention to your positive thoughts, because everybody can be negative and we could all be really, really negative. I've been there. I say I'm a recovering pessimist, but it takes a lot of mental, it just, you train yourself with consistency, with remaining conscious in your thoughts. You choose what to listen to.
yeah,
Um,
I can see that. I had a lot of negative stuff a long time ago. I was a pretty angry person for a long
yeah,
time, and I guess my negativity came out as anger.
yep.
And from the time a long time ago, 30, 40 years ago, I was put in a leadership position pretty quick in the military.
Mhm.
And when I got out excuse me, when I got off active duty in 92, that sound about right. And I went over the road driving truck, where I OTR, meaning that I spent at the time, I'd spend 3 weeks on the road and then come home for a weekend and then go back out for 3 weeks, that kind of
Wow.
thing. And I did that for most of 92 when I got out of the Army. I didn't use my GI Bill properly. I recommend that people do that. But I wanted to be a truck driver once, and I think we talked about this before, how I got that taste in my blood, right? And I couldn't let it go. So then I became a local route driver at the beginning of 93 and for this company. And less than a year later, I think that I was put into a supervisory role, and then promoted into a manager by the time 94 rolled around. And ever since then, I just been in a leadership position, right up to and so a lot of times throughout my career, and having that anger and having that military discipline, what I did was I acted like I was a drill sergeant for a long time, and I treated everybody like they were some F and G. which is a fucking new guy, right? Before
Oh
they've been
no.
trained. And that's the way I treated everybody. And unfortunately, that didn't, in an environment where there's a high unemployment rate and there's a lot to choose from, that seemed to be okay at the time, to change employees regularly and everything. And if they
Yeah.
quit on me or they didn't finish their job, I just did it for them and got rid of them, got somebody else till I found somebody who could do the job. I expected way too much from people. And so it took me a long time to figure that out. That a lot of times, when people were intimidated or afraid to come talk to me because of that anger that I had, and then it kind of taught me what not to do. And it was by dumb luck with this kid that had just been starting out in trucking one time that I realized what I was doing. So this kid was nice. We had great conversations to the point, but when he had a tough question, he would come to me and he would be intimidated by wanting to ask me this tough question. And what I realized is that in order to take that question and not jump down his throat about telling me stupid and this, or just going off on somebody, I took a breath and I stopped and I was like, this isn't like him. So what's going on here? So I told him to take a breath and we were able to have a discussion. The next thing I know, the same thing was applying to all these other people that I had bad interactions with. And it was mainly me. They would come and be a little bit on edge, and then I would amplify that into my anger. And so then it took me years to work through that myself, and to have an understanding of just because people are speaking to you in a particular type of way doesn't necessarily mean that they're attacking you. And so there's no reason to attack back or defend yourself. And sometimes there's a little bit of an intimidation, a little bit of fear going on. And so it comes across wrong. It's kind of like the way dogs can sense fear. And so they give it back once they sense it, right? Or they try to dominate. And that's what I used to do. And so like I said, it took a long time to get out of that, and then have that understanding of people and how we can better manage people through the understanding of personality types and whatnot. So then that also led me into where I'm at today. And I think that it's important to note that every time I failed at a business, I learned something major. Every time I failed at leadership, looking back on it, it allowed me to learn something from that. And I think those things are important as we go through our life. That's what makes us who we are. And I think that's where it's brought me to this point of, as a consultant, a business consultant, to be able to communicate with people on the level of, I've been there, done that. Maybe it's not exactly your story, but if we can compare, then we can figure out and talk our way through getting through it, and then how we can come out better on the other side. And I think that's where the budgeting comes at. It's the same thing. So we apply the same outlook across all parts, from our personal life, our emotional health, our physical health, to our professional health, that we apply these same kind of things, that the dream, the goal, the planning, in order to reach there. But we remain fluid. We understand that people are important, that people are humans. We all make mistakes. That common sense is different depending on where you come from. And
But
so once you,
everybody's experience is so different. So it's like everybody can't be the same. It's
right.
just,
So
and I will say another thing too about the financing and the budgeting that is super, super important, that I think is often overlooked, especially because people don't understand it, is by keeping a good budget, having a good record of the revenues that you're bringing in and the money you're putting out, also plays a huge role into the type of financing you can get, how soon you can get it, and how it can affect the longevity of the business.
yeah, and making certain that you pay your bills on time or even early.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of companies, they wait till the last minute to pay their bills. If they have 30 days, they wait till then. But you know what? It actually improves your credit to pay a little early in the business world. It also pays to manage that business credit just like you would your own personal credit. So, and make certain that, even though a lot of businesses don't report uh, uh, credit lines and things like that to the credit bureaus for businesses, it's important that we learn that process so that we make certain that the credit companies understand that we've paid on time or early, so that we do have a credit profile when we go to get more financing. In the beginning, they're going to use your personal credit in order to get there. And then once you start building that company credit, you want to make certain that's reported as well. So when we talk about financing and budgeting, that's one of the items that we will be talking about in there, is that as we go into detail about credit lines, about the different types of credit functions, from asset secured um, financing to operating lines of credit, and what each one can mean and what each one are used for. And not just two examples, but there's other ways to take a look at that. So when we get into this chapter in the book, we're going to have much more detail about these things in a simple format that's not going to, breaking down that jargon that these industry people, one of the things when you're a trucker and you're doing this and you go talk to an investment person or a finance manager, they talk in their jargon. And when they speak to you that way, it makes it so, since you don't understand all those terms, right? Then it makes it difficult for you to make a decision. So then you put a lot of trust in somebody, and that person may not have your best interest. They may be doing it for themselves, right? And anything that's done on a commission basis, like insurance and everything, means that that person is making a commission. So they're making a percentage of the money they get you to spend. So they're always doing things in your best interest? No. So when we talk about financing and budget, we need to think about those things. So the better educated we are, the better we can go out and shop for the best thing that's for us, right? And so managing all those things as we go forward, they're extremely important to the outcome or how we can go. So sometimes we have to make a sharp left turn or a sharp right turn in doing something in order to make the change that's going to allow you to go forward, right? And we need to understand all those pitfalls, and so I will be explaining all those things in the book. So
I like to call them pivots and not pitfalls.
no, we pivot to avoid a pitfall. So that's
correct. You're right. Yeah, I like to think of it like, if we can and that's part of like forecasting too, where when you're working with someone who understands your business and can relate to you with where you are, then it and also like understands your business model too. It's like that being able to pivot before a pitfall is like so important. And I'm like, I always try to think of like imagery, but yesterday I was coming up on a pothole and it looked big. As I got closer, it was a pitfall. And I was like, oh no, so I swerve around it. So like that is the whole point of being able to connect with resources, understand what's available, having people, books, different materials, different mediums to help understand
absolutely
what's available. So that way you don't fall into the hole and wreck your undercarriage, front wheel, and everything else that could potentially happen. If God forbid.
And the easiest damage would just be to blow the tire, right? But then, and that would be the easiest one to repair. But it can go so much deeper when you hit one of those things, right? And when you hit it head on, you can damage the wheel to any of the things underneath there, depending on what tire hits it, And so when we look at the trucking, and the reason we want to plan, the reason we want to have our goals of where we want to be and how we get there, and have these ideas. And the reason I say remain fluid. So now, if we take water running down a mountain, right, and it's going to create a river as all these things come together, what path does it take? Does it take the most difficult path, or does it take the path of least resistance, right? And so when I talk about remaining, I see so many people out there saying that, jumping in to starting your own company, to jumping in to becoming an entrepreneur, has to be, it has to be hard for it to work, for it to be, you got to put in this difficult, hard effort in order. And no, No, it doesn't. If you have if you have a goal, a dream, and you plan the goals, it does not have to be difficult in order to be able to think about all those things. If you what if it and you plan and try to plan for all those bad things, then yes, it's going to be difficult. But if you take the right attitude to it and you think about and without all those things, and you plan to have a proper budget in order to make certain that it's like uh, planning for the worst but hoping for the best. But the problem with that saying is that hope. eh, Well, there's all kinds of sayings about hope, right? Hope doesn't really get us anywhere. So what you do is you do make certain that you have a plan for the worst, but really you have to do your other plan and plan for the best at the same time. So
Absolutely.
you have to look forward and say, these are some potential hiccups. And so we're going to plan for these. We're going to plan for a breakdown. And when you look for the average cost of the repair of the truck, you can find all this information when you're planning, right? So that you have an understanding of what those average costs are. How many breakdowns you're going to have in 3 6 months in a piece of equipment. If it's new, if it's used, if it's depending on what age it is, and are you going to do the work yourself? All these kind of things. And so you can have some kind of picture of what it's going to be there. If you can't do the physical mechanic work yourself on the truck, then you have to plan for paying somebody else. So then your money's not going to go as far because you have labor cost, which is the highest part of any repair, the labor cost, right? So if you can't do it, if you can do it yourself, then your money's going to go farther, and if the truck isn't going to be working anyways, you may as well learn how to do it. So it's
Or
one of
maybe
those
you
things.
can find somebody to teach you too, where it's like you invest a little bit of your time, you
That's why
maybe
we have
learn.
mentors.
Exactly. And it's like, so that's to me like the gray space, and or the area in between. It's like maybe you don't know right now, you know, and when it comes to making your money go further, investing in skills, and sometimes those skills that you invest in are, practical skills, like really being able to look at your vehicles and see how you can use your own two hands to get in there and figure out how to fix it. But I will say too, you brought up something that kind of changed the way that I see the stream and the water. It's like the water doesn't give a rat's ass that the rock is in the way. It just keeps flowing.
Yep, just goes right around it, sometimes over it. So,
That's it. Yeah. And
around it both sides.
there's
Those are
always
rapids.
that's right. And it's like there's always going to be a rock. Like and I think that's where it's like where people, that assumption that it has to be hard, but it's how we perceive those obstacles that makes all the difference. And honestly, how we personally perceive those obstacles is a very clear indication of how we manage stress as well, which stress is a silent killer, so don't ignore that. We'll definitely change the way we perceive the obstacles, because it'll make the difference in your journey, whether you're getting started in logistics for the first time. I mean, there's always going to be an obstacle in logistics. I say that all the time. Like, just get used to handling obstacles. Like, we are constantly, as people would say, I don't even say putting out fires anymore. I just think you have to go with the flow. You have to. The flow is not always going to be perfect. It's not.
Right. No, yep, because things are going to get in the way and you're going to have to figure out your way around it or over it or those kind of things. So, but for me, focusing on the positive, the little things that, that we can do. And, like I said, you don't always have to take the hard road to learn from an experience or to get around it. You can take, you can slow down and take a breath, think about things a little bit, and then make the decision. For me, that sometimes it's actually the easiest decision to make. Because sometimes our gut feeling, our experiences in our life, and what brings us to a point, our experience, and that gut feeling we have, we should never second guess it, because it's our body, our subconscious, taking all those experiences and bringing it down to some of the easiest things. So second guessing ourselves is one of the worst attributes we can have. So we should always try to focus on what is our first thought process, because the way we perceive things is in that instant moment, that gut feeling that we call it, is all of our experience coming together at the same time, even though we don't know that it's happening, in order to make that decision. And so when we second guess and we go a different way, we thought, one of those things, you think long, you think wrong, right? So if you think too wrong or too long about something, you end up being wrong. And that's what that I'm talking about right there. So let our gut experience, our history, tell us the easier way to go, and allow us to go with that flow, with that easy gut feeling, right?
That is so
Sounds like
funny
a
you say
song.
that because my mom has been ragging on me about that literally since I was a child. So when I used to take tests in school, because we're using pencils and erasers, right? I don't know if kids are using pencils and erasers anymore these days, or if it's electronic,
Right.
I have no idea. But when I would take my tests and I would use my pencil, and then I would get my results whenever the teacher gave it back, whether mostly with reading and writing, because that's my strong point. But even with math, it's like you could see I selected the right answer and then I erased it and proceeded to select the wrong answer. And I have been doing this literally since I was 3 feet tall, and just now getting into letting myself, listening to those gut feelings that I have, trusting that the answer is right. And you know what? It's not always going to be right. And I don't even think of mistakes or bumps in the road as failures anymore, even though sometimes that's how it feels, because it hurts and you don't want to be a disappointment and you don't want to lose. And that's all ego. But it's learning. It is not failure. It's learning. And I think for me, one thing that scares me the most is like not learning. If you're not learning anything and you're just, I mean, it's great to feel comfortable and to know that everything is fine and everything is moving along. But like, if it's not just a little uncomfortable, that kind of scares me a little bit, because it always triggers a thought in my mind like, am I growing? Am I staying stagnant? What's happening?
Oh, well, just because I said take the path of least resistance doesn't mean that we stop growing, right? Because even
Absolutely.
though we do that, we learned something at that path. We learned
Absolutely.
how to get past that obstacle in the easiest way possible. So
Absolutely.
now, if you go past one obstacle and the easy way, and the next one is more difficult, well, that's something we still have to learn.
Absolutely.
I don't. Taking that we all get to this point in our lives at different speeds, right? Some people have this awakening about these things earlier on, and then some of us, take 30 plus years in order to get there, like me. So and the biggest
Amen.
part of our life, but the idea, see, now you're like 20 years younger than me, so I don't believe you've gotten there. You didn't take as long as I have. So
Well, and that's probably because of your help, Bob, honestly. So it's
we've
like,
known each other a year, so I can't say that. So,
well,
but I appreciate the thought. So, but
mentorship certainly
so as we go down in here, the part of that financing or budgeting is extremely important. We cannot miss that. Now there's all kinds of budgets besides financial budgets. We can plan and budget for different things, but we just got to remember that we got to remain fluid. We can't let one item destroy us. And so if we have some rainy day fund, kind of thing, then we can plan for that, right? A little bit. So we've planned a little bit because we don't know what it is. We don't know what the roadblock is. So when it comes to operating a trucking company, which is cash heavy, profit profit small, we need to make certain that we have a little bit of money in there. So I would always recommend that you don't jump into trucking and try to start a trucking company with zero experience. I would suggest that you start exploring the industry through, first off, getting the commercial driver's license and working for another company. So there are companies out there that will actually start a person driving a minivan or a courier van of some type, and then take you into a straight truck and then put you in a tractor trailer and do a graduated licensing through training. That doesn't always, it sounds like it might take some time, but it could be something that, 6 months in this vehicle and 6 months in that vehicle. And next thing you know, you're driving tractor trailer. So Pitt, Ohio is one of those companies that does exactly that. So there's some great companies in how they do that. So now, as you learn those different things through that phase, then that'll give you some thought about, since you have experience in each one of those sectors or a little bit, then it'll help you make a better decision about the type of work that you want within the industry. So, and no different than if you went to work in a warehouse to learn to drive a forklift, and you're going to start at stacking boxes, always going to be that lumper first, and I used to do that, train a person, actually some women as well. First off, you got to stack boxes. You got to start small and then start building something big. Before you can move the pallet, you got to be able to build the pallet, right? Yep. And then you take those pallets that you build and you build a load, and we work our way up from there. Even with that dock experience, you can jump into the truck for a company, and then that's how you're going to learn how to grow up from entry level hard work, blue collar type work, to being able to start your own trucking company because you learned it from the inside out. And all those things are important. So,
and that time spent on, let's say, like you mentioned, like the Pitt, Ohio training program, that time spent 6 months in each vehicle it shouldn't be thought of as a waste of time. That is the investment that you're making which ties into building the foundation that you truly want, learning where you really want to be. Because I mean, I've even done it too, where you start doing something and then you realize, like, I don't even want to do this. Why am I doing this? Like, and it's like all this money's wasted. It's like, right. Why? Take the 6 months in the vehicle, take the year, because I promise you, even though a year sounds like a long time, it flies by like this. You blink and you look back, and a year is like, it is literally a blip in the freaking radar compared to everything, to everything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about it. Let's just, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert, right? Yeah. In something. So now if you're only working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year because of vacation on average, you're looking at 2,000 hours a year. So that means 5 years to become an expert. College is 4 years. So now if you start out at 18, driving that courier van, which you can do, you're just out of high school with your high school diploma or whatever. And over the next 5 years till you're 23, you learn how to drive and get into those scenarios where now you suddenly at 23, you have a CDL, class A, with all your endorsements, and you can get a couple more years of experience of driving that truck for another company. But at 23, that's when the insurance companies say, how much experience you have. Well, you can say, in order to get your insurance, to start your own trucking company, they're going to be looking for that out of you as a driver. What's your experience? They don't want to insure somebody that's just jumping in with no experience, because that's too risky. So, but if you can show that, hey, I drove as a courier, I drove as a straight truck driver doing LTL, I drove a tractor trailer doing LTL, and here's my company history, it's verifiable, then you're going to be able to get lower rates because of that. So now those 4 or 5 years spent are the same as going to college. So now it's no different than if you wanted to become an auto mechanic. If you go to the right shop, they're going to help put you through all your ASCE or ASE certifications and through there, and you're going to have to pay for that. It's like, buying those tools. You have to start somewhere. So starting somewhere in the beginning of something is starting at the bottom, if you know nothing, to work your way up. So, to become an expert in driving that truck in that area, you're going to have 5 years of work history. So, if you really want to do that, then putting in that time and effort is nothing but your education. And that's what you need to think about. And I think learning that pathway for people, now we can accelerate that at different points, because at 23, starting a trucking company, becoming an owner operator, to do that, that's having some knowledge. That's having some guts to jump in at that point, right?
Some grit, honestly. Yeah. And that's not a bad place to be at 23. It's a really great place to be learning and growing. And it's as someone who has a trade under my belt, I think it's, and I think of trucking, logistics, and supply chain. It needs to be considered a trade because you cannot look to a logistics expert or someone that could sit there and mentor you, um, and completely overlook the fact that there's some hours put in there. Like this knowledge most of the time, like, yeah, programs are becoming more popular for schooling and stuff like that, and there are certain licensing and certificates that you can get. Everything I know, I learned trial by fire and through the help of someone else in the industry. So it's like a lot of that probably same for you too. And I speak to professionals all the time who have a combination of experience as well, where they learned by doing and they learned through the help or lack thereof of their peers around them, because you even learn when you think you're not getting help, and then you could just look back and appreciate it because you can pay it forward to somebody else, at least for me.
Right.
I'm not bitter about it anymore. But I think that that's so important. And we do have to wrap.
Oh, we do. Yes.
Yeah, this was a really good conversation today. I thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Bob. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Well, yeah. So same here. And if we take all the mumbo jumbo out, we did spend about a half hour on talking about the financing and budgeting,
Yeah.
which was we slotted for in the first place. So, next week, I think next week we're talking about, let me see here if I can find it. Equipment. Is that correct? Operations, maybe?
I believe
Yeah,
so.
I think the video for next week or the link to it is already posted, and we'll have to get some people out there or get some things going, right? So
Yeah, this week is going to be an interesting week for me as I try to get 150. I'm going to try to get 150 followers on Logistics Lens, so that way we can just go live from there.
oh, is that what you need,
Yes,
150 followers?
150. So if you're listening and you enjoy these chats, please go to Logistics Lens, one word, and subscribe and follow it. Not the newsletter, the actual page, and I'll share the page later and as under the link as well. And I'm just going to invite people to like it, and hopefully we can get some traction. And I can keep it exactly where it is. If not, then I'm going to have to remove all the events that I created and have them stream through the way that I had it before, which is fine. I just hope I don't have to do that. But
Okay,
that's my
understand.
project. And I
And
believe,
we can see some of these past videos on your page or Logistics Lens page.
yeah, so
So
that's
where's
what I'm
that?
wanting to do. I do want to embed them, eventually move them over, so that way it's all going and flowing through that page as well. So
Okay.
stay tuned, and thanks again, Bob, and I will talk
You're
to you
welcome.
soon.
All right. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
So, bye.